A vote on final passage is expected sometime this afternoon, and later debate on a bill reauthorizing intelligence programs for fiscal year 2011. Now live coverage of the U.S. House.
Gracious and loving God, we are grateful for the gifts and blessings you have shown our nation. Be with those who are suffering the devastation of the great storms that we have experienced, and help us as a nation to respond. Bless the women and men gathered here who are called to protect and serve the people of the United States. Watch over and bless all those who serve our nation abroad, and guide the members of this Congress that their work today will reflect your love and compassion, and guide our nation to be a leader in justice and peace. We pray this in the name of the one who created us in love. Amen.
The Chair has examined the Journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House his approval thereof, and pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the Journal stands approved. Pledge of Allegiance will be led today by the gentleman from New Jersey, Mr. Sears.
Would all join me in saluting our flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
The Chair will entertain up to 15 one-minute requests on each side. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm honored to welcome Monsignor Craig Harrison from Bakersfield, California, and appreciate that he was able to be here today to open up our floor session with the invocation. It is great to have a fellow Bakersfield High driller here on the floor with me. Since he returned to Bakersfield in 1999 to be the pastor of his hometown parish, Monsignor Craig has had a profound positive impact on the lives of the thousands in our community. The fact that the number of families in his parish has increased by over 5,000 and the enrollment in the parish school has doubled is a testament to his leadership in our community. He's more than just a faith leader. He is an author of a children's book. He is a faith leader to many of us throughout the community, and on a personal note, he was a faith leader to my father as he battled his fight with cancer. Monsignor Craig is a true friend to the Bakersfield community, and I appreciate that he was able to share his words of wisdom on the House floor, and I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. The Chair will entertain up to 15 further requests for one-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Request permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, the administration is fighting wildfires. In December, the United States sent 2 firefighting planes to battle fires in Israel. In April, 2 specially equipped U.S. Air Force C-130 cargo planes and 30 personnel were sent to battle wildfires in Mexico. The fires in Mexico burned about 380 square miles near the Texas border. The United States came to the rescue, but not everyone gets help from the United States. A wildfire epidemic has also occurred in Texas with more than 9,000 fires. 2 million acres have been burned. That is the size of Rhode Island and Delaware combined, and 10 times the size of the fires in Mexico. And the state is still on fire. Texas Governor Perry requested federal help, but the administration summarily denied the governor's request. The administration, it seems, is more concerned about taking care of foreign nations while ignoring Americans in Texas. Why does the administration despise Texas? Meanwhile, the fires continue, and that's just the way it is.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from New Jersey rise? The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to condemn the brutal beating and subsequent death of Juan Wilfredo Soto. Last Thursday, Soto, while participating in a peaceful protest against the Castro regime, Cuban authorities beat him so badly that he was later taken to the hospital where he died. Soto was a brave man, respected advocate who helped support hunger strikes of Human Rights Award winner Guillermo Fariñas. Juan Wilfredo Soto's death is the latest brazen illustration of the violent methods the Cuban brothers utilized to oppress freedom in Cuba. In the last 2 months, reports of oppression have increased. As many praise the false promises of the 6th Communist Party Congress held in Cuba last month, few acknowledge the crackdown on dissidents and the journalists that took place prior to the Congress. Cuban authorities reportedly arrested and detained opposition members to ensure all voices critical to the regime will be silent and that no protests will be visible. The United States and the international community must join together in condemning the wrongful death of Juan Wilfredo Lopez and supporting human rights on the island. We must show Cuban leaders that their brutality is not going to go unnoticed. And I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Gentlelady from California rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, if the majority's plan for Medicare ever becomes law, seniors will lose their guaranteed benefit and get a private insurance voucher. Seniors are calling. They are nervous and justified in asking all sorts of questions about the plan, such as, will the voucher cover me if I get sick? Will the voucher result in ration care? And will I need to pay more out of pocket? The Congressional Budget Office says seniors will pay more, much more. Out-of-pocket costs to seniors will double in 2022 and rise by 68% by 2030. This massive cost shifting saves the federal government a lot of money. And where does all the money taken from seniors and Medicare go? Well, it doesn't pay off the debt. It doesn't create jobs or help folks pay for gas or groceries, but it does go to finance large, new tax cuts for the most well-off. This is a wrong approach to caring for our seniors.
Yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from California rise? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, right now, Californians in my home district face an almost 14% unemployment rate and are dealing with a fourth highest rate of foreclosure in the nation. What my constituents need above else is for both of us, Republicans and Democrats, to come together on creating new jobs. Yet, in the last 18 weeks, the Republicans have controlled the House. They have yet to bring one single bill forth on creating jobs. Instead, they have put forward a partisan agenda that's more about scoring political points than helping the American families. We should be putting Americans' family back to work. We should not be voting to dismantle safety nets for seniors and the vulnerable Americans. The Republicans attack Medicare and Medicaid, go against our core values, and threaten the health care of 44 million low-income Americans. It's time to stop politic games. Let's work together, and I state let's work together and focus on straightening our economy and creating jobs. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois wish to be recognized? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to congratulate the Newark Community High School boys basketball team on their 2011 Illinois Class 1A state championship title. This is a great accomplishment, and their team, their coaches, and the entire Newark community should be very proud. Newark, Illinois is a town of less than 1,000 people, symbolic of our great nation, and is a place I am honored to represent. Newark High School, with a total enrollment of less than 200 students, has never before won the state championship. Coach Rick Tollefson, head coach of Newark Norsemen, has been with the program for 5 years, and in that time has led the Norsemen to 3 consecutive sectional championships, as well as this year's state title. It has certainly been an exciting time for this close-knit community. On behalf of the House of Representatives, I'd like to personally congratulate everyone who made Newark history this year, as well as to those who made it possible, the school's administrators and the entire Newark community. I appreciate their hard work and dedication to this basketball program and to the students of Newark High School. Congratulations on a job well done. I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from American Samoa wish to be recognized? Without objection. Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, just last week the U.S. military carried out a covert operation that ended in the killing of the most wanted terrorist on the planet, Osama bin Laden. The news of Osama bin Laden's death at the hands of our heroic Navy SEALs set forth a wave of tremendous relief by the American people. However, Mr. Speaker, we also learned that the U.S. military and the CIA used the code name Geronimo for the operation to seize and kill Osama bin Laden. The first reports of the details of the raid stated that Osama bin Laden has been identified as Geronimo, enemy killed in action. Mr. Speaker, I would strongly suggest to all my colleagues in the House, you should go and see the movie Geronimo and see for yourselves if the Chiricahua Apache warrior Geronimo was a terrorist and murderer of thousands of innocent men, women, and children like Osama bin Laden. On the contrary, Geronimo was one of the greatest American Indian warriors who fought against some of the most vicious, cruelest, and inhumane treatment and policies instituted by our federal government against this poor nation. The President and the CIA Director Panetta owes them an apology.
The gentleman's time has expired.
I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida wish to be recognized? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to inform my colleagues of yet another ruthless murder by the Castro dictatorship in Cuba. Last Sunday, Juan Wilfredo Soto Garcia, a dissident leader on the island, was viciously beaten to death by Castro's state security thugs simply for participating in a peaceful protest. Soto belonged to Foro Antitotalitario Unido, or the United Anti-Totalitarian Forum, a peaceful dissident organization. Witnesses have attested that two of Castro's henchmen cuffed his hands behind his back and then beat him mercilessly and repeatedly with batons until he was dead. For 30 years, Soto peacefully worked for freedom and change on the island and served 12 years in Castro's political prisons for his pro-democracy advocacy. Last year, Soto stated, quote, "I hold Cuban state security, the government, and the repressive police here responsible for whatever happens to me in the future," end quote. This past weekend, he gave the ultimate sacrifice for Cuba's freedom and became yet another victim in the Castro brothers' 50-year reign of terror. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Kentucky rise?
With permission to address the House for 1 minute.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, this past Tuesday, 41 House Republicans sent a letter to President Obama pleading with him to stop the criticism of the GOP's plan to turn Medicare into a private voucher system, a system that would cost future seniors thousands of dollars each year. Let bygones be bygones, these Republicans said. Let's wipe the slate clean. Well, I can't help but laugh at the irony. Last year in districts all throughout the country, Republican candidates for Congress attacked Democrats for supporting the Affordable Care Act, claiming it cut $500 billion from Medicare. Wrongly, I might add. Fast forward 1 year later, and those same Republicans now in Congress just a few weeks ago voted for a budget that actually embraces the very same $500 billion in savings we found in Medicare and the Affordable Care Act. There's a difference, though. In the health care law, Democrats took that $500 billion and reinvested it in Medicare to increase the life of the program for more than a decade. What did the Republicans do? They take that $500 billion and use it to help pay for more tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans and giant oil companies. And Medicare, they dismantle it, forcing future seniors into a new system that will require them to pay upwards of $180,000 more for their care. The American people will not let them forget.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Virginia seek recognition? Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, 1 year ago, lax regulation and reckless pursuit of higher oil company profits resulted in 11 deaths, 200 million gallons of oil dumped into our Gulf waters, tens of thousands of marine and aquatic life lost, and a damaged fishing and tourism industry. A panel of experts showed us how we can learn from past mistakes and implement regulations to ensure that this disaster doesn't happen again. Yet over the last 2 weeks, the Republican majority has passed legislation to create an even more lax regulatory environment than existed before the BP oil spill disaster. Opening our shores to drilling and returning to pre-BP oil spill regulations won't reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and it won't reduce the price of gas at the pump. The United States holds less than 2% of the world's oil reserves, while we consume more than 22%. Even if all restricted areas in the U.S. could somehow be brought into production at this moment, the oil they would yield under the best scenario is about 1 million barrels of oil a day, 5% of our daily consumption. Those bills shouldn't get any further than the House. The Senate should reject them. The American people should better understand what's happening to the American consumer at the pump. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Michigan seek recognition? Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's very clear in these economic times that Americans need jobs, and more accurately, we need the investment that will create jobs. And we've got the money to do it. In light of the fact that bin Laden is no longer a threat to Americans, we don't need to spend over $100 billion a year in Afghanistan. So again, let's take a share of the money that's gone to rebuild Afghanistan, have it sent back to the U.S. taxpayers right here in the United States to create jobs right here in the U.S. Let's help rebuild American cities like the city of Detroit, and when you do that, you rebuild U.S.'s manufacturing capacity. That'll create jobs for thousands, even millions of Americans right here at home. The best way to make it in America, redirect our tax dollars away from Afghanistan in part to create jobs right here for American people. I yield back my time.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Florida rise?
I'd like to be recognized for 1 minute.
The gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, a few days ago I visited a local gas station and spoke with dozens of customers about the impact of rising gas prices on already financially strapped families. Overwhelmingly, my constituents told me that we must look at a broad range of energy solutions to reduce our dependency on foreign oil and reduce the price we pay at the pump. We should increase domestic energy production, promote energy efficiency, and encourage private investment in renewable energy technologies as part of a comprehensive plan to address our energy needs. Not only will this all-inclusive approach ease the burden of high gas prices, but it will help create jobs that this country needs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate it.
The gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentleman from Texas rise?
Morning, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, by the direction on Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 264 and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Calendar Number 36, House Resolution 264. Resolved that at any time after the adoption of this resolution, the Speaker may, pursuant to Clause 2B of Rule 18, declare the House resolved into the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union for consideration of the bill, H.R. 754, to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2011 for intelligence and intelligence-related activities of the United States government, the Community Management Account, and the Central Intelligence Agency Retirement and Disability System, and for other purposes. The first reading of the bill shall be dispensed with. All points of order against consideration of the bill are waived. General debate shall be confined to the bill and shall not exceed 1 hour, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. After general debate, the bill shall be considered for amendment under the 5-minute rule. It shall be in order to consider as an original bill for the purpose of amendment under the 5-minute rule the amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence now printed in the bill. The committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be considered as read. All points of order against the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute are waived. No amendment to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute shall be in order except those printed in the report of the Committee on Rules accompanying this resolution. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question in the House or in the Committee of the Whole. All points of order against such amendments are waived. At the conclusion of consideration of the bill for amendment, the committee shall rise and report the bill to the House with such amendments as may have been adopted. Any member may demand a separate vote in the House on any amendment adopted in the Committee of the Whole to the bill, or to the committee amendment in the nature of a substitute. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the bill, and amendments thereto to final passage without intervening motion, except one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 1 hour.
For the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the gentleman, my friend from Florida, the distinguished gentleman, Mr. Hastings, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purpose of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks concerning House Resolution 264, which provides for a structured rule designated by the Rules Committee for consideration of H.R. 754. This rule allows for 9 of the amendments submitted to the Rules Committee to be made in order.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of this rule and the underlying bill. The fiscal year 2011 budget process began with last Congress with about a dozen hearings and member briefings, and continued into this Congress with more briefings and negotiations. This legislation was introduced by the chairman of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, the gentleman from Michigan, Mike Rogers, and has gone through regular order to achieve its presence on the floor today. H.R. 754 was marked up in the Intelligence Committee, and the chairman of the Rules Committee, the gentleman David Dreyer, provided a structured amendment process for 9 additional amendments from Republicans and Democrats to be considered today on the House floor. The bill we are discussing today authorizes the intelligence and intelligence-related activities of the United States government for fiscal year 2011 in order to enhance the national security of the United States, to support and assist the armed forces of the United States, and to support the President of the United States in the execution of the foreign policy of the United States of America. This bill is a vital tool for congressional oversight of the classified activities of the intelligence community, and it is critical to ensuring that our intelligence agencies have the resources and the authorities they need to do to accomplish this important work on behalf of keeping America free. The primary vehicle for exercising credible congressional oversight over our intelligence agency is the Intelligence Authorization Bill. Yet, we have not passed a bona fide intelligence authorization bill in 6 years. Although the National Security Act requires intelligence activities to be specifically authorized, in recent years, certain appropriations have included the language that would deem the intelligence funding to be authorized. This procedure meets the statutory requirement, but has weakened the ability, I believe, of Congress in its oversight of intelligence activities in recent years. The U.S. intelligence community plays a critical role in the war on terrorism and securing our country from many other threats that we face as a nation. The recent killing of the terrorist Osama bin Laden is a clear example of the important work our intelligence agencies are doing behind the scenes every single day to protect America and Americans. Keeping the laws governing our intelligence operations up to date and ensuring that there are no unnecessary burdens in the way of future successes is exactly why we are here today and we seek the authorization to pass an annual intelligence bill today. This intelligence authorization bill funds all U.S. intelligence activities spanning 17 separate agencies. Last year, this funding totaled roughly $80 billion. Our nation's current challenging fiscal circumstances demand that Congress fulfill its duties and provide the appropriate accountability and financial oversight of our classified intelligence programs through an authorization bill yearly. Additionally, This bill will ensure that Congress funds the requirements of the men and women, the brave and dedicated men and women of the intelligence community, military, civilian, and many others who directly support the war zones and who are engaged in other dangerous operations to keep America safe. The underlying legislation provides oversight and authorization for critical intelligence activities, including global counterterrorism operations, such as the one that took out the terrorist Osama bin Laden, tactical intelligence support to support combat units in Iraq and Afghanistan and wherever else they're needed around the world, cyber defense, detecting and countering weapons of mass destruction, global monitoring of foreign militaries, weapons tests, and arms control treaties. Additionally, this bill's classified annex provides detailed guidance on the intelligence spending, including adjustments to costly programs. This bill takes an important step forward in the intelligence community to help them meet the same financial accounting standard as other parts of the government. These accounting standards will help uncover savings in the current programs that can be reinvested into vital programs and priorities as they are returned to the American taxpayer. I was very pleased this week when the gentleman, Mike Rogers, and Mr. Ruppersberger, who represents the minority, came to the Rules Committee to talk about the needs of the intelligence community. And in particular, I was very pleased as they worked so closely together to ensure that the issues that were contained within this document, the agreements that would be in law, and perhaps more importantly, the important relationships that would be shared by them as we work together to ensure that this country is safe, that we do so in a way where the American people see that keeping America safe, providing the necessary resources to the men and women of the intelligence community, and expecting the results that would come from them is a very important part of what our job as members of Congress is all about. I applaud Chairman Mike Rogers of Michigan for providing this Congress with much-needed intelligence with the Intelligence Authorization Bill, and I appreciate the exhaustive process on a bipartisan basis, not only that Chairman Rogers has led, but that includes a return to regular order in the authorization of this important legislation. I rise in support of this bill, the rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Florida is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank my friend from Texas for yielding the time. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 74, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2011, authorizes appropriations for fiscal year 2011 for the U.S. intelligence and intelligence-related activities within the jurisdiction of the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, including the National Intelligence Program and the Military Intelligence Program, as well as for the Intelligence Community Management Account and for the Central Intelligence Agency Retirement and Disability System. We're considering this legislation at an auspicious time. The death of Osama bin Laden and the disarray in the al-Qaeda network comes as a result of years of painstaking effort by the hard-working men and women of the intelligence community, the military, President Bush, and President Obama's gutsy, courageous, and correct call on May 1st of this year. They succeeded admirably in carrying out a difficult and dangerous mission. This legislation codifies many of the lessons learned in recent years that led to Osama bin Laden's demise. It's important that we continue to provide the necessary resources to sustain the momentum the United States and its allies enjoy in the effort to protect our nation and its citizens. As the former vice chair of the House Intelligence Committee, I personally know that the intelligence community is the first line of defense against those wishing to do us harm here at home and across the globe. Where terrorists or other elements, as we speak, are plotting attacks, planning operations, or are actively involved in harming our citizens, the men and women of the intelligence community are devoted to acting on the information they gather to thwart those efforts. We owe them a debt of gratitude and our sincere thanks. These courageous men and women often work quietly, unnoticed, and too often unrecognized, but nevertheless, they are critical to ensuring the security of our nation. I've had the honor and privilege of meeting many of our intelligence professionals during my oversight travel as a member of the Intelligence Committee. I cannot overstate how much I appreciate and am humbled by their service. Over the past 10 years, our country has continued to make daily progress against threats thanks to the service of those dedicated professionals. We must keep in mind, though, that in spite of our best efforts, we still face many real threats, and we still have much work to do to get it right. Mr. Speaker, H.R. 754 provides detailed guidance and authorizes appropriations for the many agencies of the intelligence community, while also improving accountability and transparency. It is essential that we streamline and coordinate oversight for counterintelligence. H.R. 754 amends the Counterintelligence Enhancement Act of 2002 to require the national counterintelligence strategy to be aligned with the policies and strategy of the Director of National Intelligence. It is often reported that our government agencies come under cyber attack all day, every day, 365 days a year. International criminals, malicious individuals, and even other nations are actively engaged in a constant effort to break into our cyber networks to obtain information or to wreak havoc on the systems that govern our nation's infrastructure, financial, military, diplomatic, and social networks. We must, of all things, be mindful of our responsibilities in that area. It can have a devastating impact if not properly attended. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we must consider diversity to be a mission imperative. I've stated time and again that the intelligence community is not diverse enough to successfully meet its requirements and achieve success on its missions. On February 26 of 2010, the House of Representatives passed my amendment to H.R. 2701, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2010, which requires of the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, in coordination with the heads of the elements of the intelligence community, to submit to Congress a report on the plans of each element of the community to increase diversity. The report is expected to be finalized in October of this year. Simply put, we need people who blend in, who speak the language, and understand the cultures in the countries that we are targeting. It's time for the intelligence community to get serious about improving diversity for the sake of our national security. If the intelligence community is to succeed in its global mission, it must have a global face. I'm at this time prepared to reserve further comments, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'm delighted to have join us the gentlewoman from Waite Park, Minnesota, the gentlewoman, Ms. Bachman. I'd like to yield her 3 minutes.
The gentlewoman is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and also I thank the gentleman from Texas who's doing a wonderful job this morning managing this bill, Pete Sessions. Mr. Speaker, all of our nation's great liberties depend on our national security. I think that's something that we can all agree on. This is a bipartisan issue. We're a nation at war, and we're pitted against terrorists who are bent on destroying our very way of life. As the treasure trove of evidence, which we're so grateful was received, was seized from Osama bin Laden's compound confirms to us, the enemy is always adapting, always evolving, always plotting further attacks. We have to be informed, and we have to be one step ahead of the enemy at least. It's our intelligence community, Mr. Speaker, that gives us heroic service day in and day out. This morning I had the privilege of being at our nation's Central Intelligence Agency, and I want to commend them for the work that they do, the brilliant work that they did most recently to secure this #1 target. Nearly all of it goes unrecognized, Mr. Speaker, until a moment like last Sunday evening, May 1st, when a grateful nation learned that the men and women of our intelligence services, working hand in hand with those in military uniform, had brought about the demise of the world's most prominent and notorious terrorist, Osama bin Laden. Years of relentless and diligent pursuit yielded an overwhelming success. And that's why I'm so honored to be here on the floor today with my distinguished colleague from Texas, Mr. Sessions, to stand here on the House floor as a member of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, calling on behalf of my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, to pass the FY11 Intelligence Authorization Bill. Because the American people have made it clear, Mr. Speaker, they made it clear to us not only once, but over and over again. They want this Congress to exercise the utmost seriousness when dealing with our nation's spending crisis. And so this bill is a step in that direction. It ensures that there is proper congressional financial oversight. And I would like to tip my hat now to the Democrat ranking member, Dutch Ruppensberger, who has done a magnificent job together with our chairman, Mike Rogers, in making sure that we work together as one, seamlessly, in a bipartisan fashion. I have been just so delighted. I have never served on a committee where I've seen greater bipartisanship, because we put down our partisan swords when it comes to securing the safety and security of our nation. And this bill is a step in that direction, ensuring there's not only proper congressional financial oversight, something that was lacking, unfortunately, in the past 6 years, but we are dedicated to making sure that our responsible approach with intelligence does not sacrifice neither the security of our nation, and this measure which funds our intelligence community will ensure that our intelligence community has the resources that they so richly deserve. And I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased at this time to yield 3 minutes to my good friend, the distinguished gentleman from Maryland, the ranking member of the Committee on Intelligence, Mr. Ruppensberger.
The gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, I want to recognize the distinguished former Vice Chairman on the Intelligence Committee, Mr. Hastings, for his hard work over the course of his 8 years on the committee. I had the privilege of serving with Mr. Hastings and know he was committed to supporting our intelligence professionals. He was a leader on the issue of diversity in the intelligence community, and I applaud him for those efforts. Having a diverse intelligence community workforce is not simply the right thing to do, it is critical to our mission. Today, I am pleased to join my colleague and friend, Michelle Bachmann, in support of H.R. 754, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2011. I thank her for her comments about partisan politics. The Intelligence Committee is a bipartisan committee that works together. The stakes are too high for us not to work together, and that's what we're attempting to do. Now, the killing of Osama bin Laden is clearly the most monumental intelligence achievement in recent history. Our intelligence professionals worked together as a team, brought Osama bin Laden to justice, and killed killed him. It was a risky mission that was executed with intense training and high level of skill. These professionals risked their lives to keep our country safe, and no American lives were lost. I am pleased that Congress can provide the intelligence community with the resources, capabilities, authorities, and oversight they need to continue this great work. After months of negotiations and a number of changes to address many of the concerns of the administration, I believe this bill moves in a positive direction to assert congressional oversight over intelligence activities. I'm also pleased that Chairman Rogers and I could come to an agreement to add additional counterterrorism positions to the CIA. With this change, I will support this bill. This bill adds several thousand civilian positions above the level enacted in FY 2010. There is also a large increase in personnel at the National Counterterrorism Center, that's the NCTC. Among others, the bill adds hundreds of millions of dollars for intelligence above current levels. However, I urge a no vote on this rule because it does not allow all members of Congress to offer amendments to this bill. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. You know, Mr. Speaker, with the election of this new large Republican class, some 87 new members, we picked up in particular, a member who will speak here in just a second, a young man who had devoted his life not only to his country, through service to the military, but also to law enforcement. He comes to Washington from Florida, where he had been a distinguished sheriff of a large department. He came to us with not only a thought and belief about securing this country and making sure that we took care of citizens, but perhaps more importantly, here's a clear thinker on seeing not only intelligence issues, but also the broader context of protecting this country. He has a son who serves in the military, and he has been very thoughtful. He's a member of the Rules Committee, the gentleman from Brookville, Florida. Please help me, if you please extend 3 minutes to the gentleman from the Rules Committee, Mr. Nugent.
The gentleman from Florida is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd also like to thank my colleague from the Rules Committee, which I have a pleasure of serving with, Mr. Sessions. I rise today in support of the rule, Resolution 264, the underlying legislation of H.R. 754. About a week and a half ago, we all learned that justice had been served. Justice for our civil servants working in Kenya and Tunisia embassies in 1998, justice for our troops serving on the USS Cole in 2000, and justice for the innocent victims of September 11th, 2001. After many years of hard work, stealthy intelligence work, we found Osama bin Laden's hideout in Pakistan. Based upon this information, a highly trained team of Navy SEALs came in, performed their mission, and rid the world of one of history's most evil and notorious terrorists. Mr. Speaker, this would not have been possible without the work of our hardworking intelligence community. It was President Bush who laid the groundwork for this intelligence that ultimately made all of this possible. And it was President Obama who put this information together and made the gutsy call that only a commander-in-chief can make. Both of these men deserve our thanks for the work they did to make this possible. It is our duty as members of Congress to ensure that our intelligence community has the tools they need to continue to keep our nation safe. That is what H.R. 754 does. As a prior law enforcement officer, I can attest to the value of good intel in apprehending those that would do dastardly things to our country. With that, I encourage my colleagues to support the rule, support the underlying bill, and support the intelligence community that is keeping this nation safe. With that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very pleased at this time to yield 2 minutes to my good friend, the distinguished gentlewoman from Texas, a member of the Judiciary Committee, Ms. Jackson Lee.
The gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Mr. Hastings, thank you for your service, years on the Intelligence Committee, and to the ranking member, to the members that are on the floor. I rise to support the underlying bill and the rule of recognizing that human intelligence and the resources that provide a safety net for the American people are crucial. the CIA and Department of Defense and other intelligence civilian agencies, along with the United States military. I introduced HRES 240 to chronicle the successful apprehension and demise of Osama bin Laden, to actually emphasize how combined together the brawn and intellect of the United States military, the human intelligence over the years, the work of President Clinton, President Bush, and President Obama's strategic decision that had to be made by the civilian minds working with the military minds, emphasized the constitutional values of this country, that civilians working with the military can in fact provide the armor protection of the United States of America. I am grateful for that genius, and I want to thank them. And our legislation had over 50 co-sponsors. But as well, I believe now that we can actually say in good conscience to bring the troops home from Afghanistan. Our mission is accomplished. We realize that human intelligence can help us target those who want to do us harm, and we have the constitutional fabric, along with the United States military and the likes of JSOC and many others in the intelligence community, to work on behalf of the American people. We can bring the men and women that are based now, over 100,000, in Afghanistan home. And you know what? Mother's Day was this past week, and sadly, soldiers fell in battle on Mother's Day. Let us not have another Mother's Day that some mother in America somewhere loses a child to battle in Afghanistan, where we can use smart power and use intelligence and use a minimal of force. It is time now for America to welcome home her heroes with honor, and as well to thank those who indicated the brawn and the intellect that could make good on a promise that, yes, you will come to justice if you do harm to the American people. I yield back and ask support for the underlying legislation and the rule.
The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, Mr. Speaker, I do understand that the Democratic Party is interested in leaving Afghanistan now that Osama bin Laden has been killed, but I would suggest to the American people that
Yield on that point before yielding to Ms. Reed.
I would yield to the gentleman.
I would just urge my colleague, not with a broad reference, with reference to the Democratic Party. Everybody in the Democratic Party does not agree that we should leave Afghanistan until the administration and the military and the intelligence community have completed their work.
Thank you. Gaining back my time, I appreciate and respect the words not only from my friend, but I believe he's absolutely correct. I simply hear the drumbeat that comes out of this town about leaving now that there's been a big victory in dealing with the #1 terrorist in the world. And I would suggest to you that there's still much work left to be done, and that we must not change the focus of the men and women who today are in harm's way. We should not change the focus of the American people to get them away from the job that is being done on a day-to-day basis, and that we should not begin the drumbeat until we have further completed the work that is necessary to ensure that this country is safe. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would welcome a young member of the Rules Committee, a gentleman who served as mayor of Corning, New York, a man who's dedicated himself to public service. I'd like to yield the gentleman, Mr. Reed, 2 minutes.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my colleague from Texas for the opportunity to rise today. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the rule for H.R. 754, the Intelligence Authorization Act for fiscal year 2011. Mr. Speaker, the intelligence community works long hours in distant parts of the world to keep our country safe. But the things about the United States intelligence community is that when they do their job right, no one knows about it. When they are successful in that diligence that they perform every day of the week, 24 hours a day, every day of the year, we often do not hear about that success. I stand here today, Mr. Speaker, to commend the diligent, painstaking work of the United States intelligence officials for all that they do. And then, in particular, I stand today to recognize the hard work of our intelligence community that resulted in capturing and killing the man who masterminded the multiple attacks which killed thousands of Americans being brought to justice this past week. Thanks to the intelligence professionals who work for our country, the world is a safer place without Osama bin Laden. I have an amendment with my colleague, Mr. Grimm, that will be discussed on this floor tomorrow and hopefully supported and voted upon in a bipartisan fashion to recognize the efforts of those intelligence officials. Mr. Speaker, I rise also today to commend the work that is being done here in this chamber, that is being led by this side of the aisle, in having an open dialogue, in having an open process. We have 8 amendments, or 9 amendments, that are going to be considered under this rule and in this chamber tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, that is a direct change from the history that has been demonstrated here for years prior to us coming here. It is time that we on this side of the aisle recognize that we are going to listen to the American people. We are going to have an honest conversation with the American people about the issues that we face on a day-to-day basis. And as such, I stand today and urge my colleagues to vote yes on this rule and yes on H.R. 754. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Florida.
I would urge my friend from Texas that I'm going to be the last speaker. I don't know whether you have others. If you do, I would reserve. If not, I'll proceed.
Good. I appreciate the gentleman seeking that information from me. I believe I have 2 additional speakers before I close.
All right.
And if you'd like for me at this time, we'll just go ahead and run through that order.
Then I thank my friend, and I would reserve at this time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 2 minutes to another one of our brand new members, the gentleman from Corpus Christi, Texas, who brings to this House and to the floor not only a common sense element, but the insistence that people from Corpus Christi will be represented on the floor of this House in such a way that will benefit not only our country, but also the United States military, in particular the United States Navy, that has a large base in Corpus Christi. I'd like to yield 2 minutes to the gentleman, Mr. Farenthold.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Sessions. I rise today in support of both the rule and the underlying bill. We stand today in America that was very different from America a month ago. It's almost like the fog has been lifted over America. We sought to capture or kill Osama bin Laden for 10 years. And just recently that was accomplished, and it's almost as if the sun is a little bit brighter, and the can-do American spirit has been revived. That same spirit that took us to the moon, that same spirit that has led us to victory in the past. You know, our intelligence community is key to that success, as is our military. It is absolutely imperative that we support and back the intelligence community that provides us the knowledge and information that not only helps us win wars, but more importantly keeps us out of war. Knowledge is power. What we know about beforehand gives us the opportunity to stop conflicts before they happen. We're also in an era of a tight budget now. We're looking at an authorization bill that increases and provides adequate oversight to our intelligence to make sure those resources are being spent wisely and are being spent in the defense of this nation, in the furtherance of our interest, and in the furtherance of freedom. With that, I yield back, sir.
The gentleman yields back.
Mr. Speaker, I continue to reserve.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have remaining?
13 minutes remaining. The gentleman from Texas has 13 minutes
remaining. I'd like to, at this time, yield to the young gentleman, the chairman of the Rules Committee, Mr. Dreyer, for such time as he may consume.
The gentleman from California is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me begin by expressing my appreciation to distinguished Vice Chairman of the Rules Committee, my friend from Dallas, Mr. Sessions, for his management of this very important rule. And I think it's appropriate that Mr. Sessions is a manager of legislation that enjoys strong bipartisan support, because he's always seeking a consensus on issues when we can find areas of agreement. And the fact is, we have been able to see the chairman and the ranking member of the Select Committee on Intelligence to work together in a bipartisan way to deal with the very important security and intelligence needs for the United States of America. As my new colleague from Corpus Christi has just said, what a great day for America, the day that we were able to see Osama bin Laden captured and killed, brought to justice. And I congratulate President Obama, and of course all those who were involved. I congratulate President Bush, who from September 11th forward was determined to bring Osama bin Laden to justice, and I congratulate all of the men and women in uniform, including those who, as of September 11, 2001, became part of the front line, that being firefighters and law enforcement right here on our soil, because that was a day for the first time ever that we faced an attack on our soil. But this legislation, Mr. Speaker, is specifically designed to extend our appreciation and thanks based on an amendment that we've made in order from our colleague from Staten Island, Mr. Grimm, for those in the intelligence community who have done such a spectacular job in dealing with the challenge of capturing and bringing to justice Osama bin Laden. We are going to have in this bill a number of amendments made in order. I'm particularly proud that as we worked with the members of the Intelligence Committee, recognizing that obviously this bill deals with some very, very sensitive items that frankly can't be discussed here on the House floor. But with that in mind, we were able to make in order 9 amendments that are going to be offered by members, 5 amendments that will be offered by Democrats, 4 amendments offered by Republicans, and as I said, the amendment that will allow for the longest period of debate will provide an opportunity for the members of this House to discuss, and I know it will be, again, bipartisan appreciation to those in the intelligence community who've been able to have the success that we've witnessed most recently. And so, Mr. Speaker, I think it's a great day for the United States of America to once again demonstrate the global leadership role that we provide, not only economically and geopolitically, but through our security, intelligence, and military strength. And so, Mr. Speaker, I urge my colleagues to support both this rule, which again will allow for a free-flowing debate and opportunity for both parties to participate, and in the underlying legislation itself. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida.
Mr. Speaker, at this time, I would, in some respects, reiterate much of what our colleagues have said with regard to Osama bin Laden. For 10 years, he held the title of Scourge of the Earth. And I believe all of us are pleased that to the degree that he contributed to injustice, justice as it pertains to him has finally been served. It is my hope that the families of the terrible events that transpired on 9/11 and the USS Cole and the families of the East African embassy bombings can find just a little more solace and just a little more closure as a result of his demise at the hands of extraordinary work on behalf of a substantial number of courageous Americans. As a nation, I would ask that we be extremely mindful that al-Qaeda has not been removed, nor has the sentiment of this very dangerous societal element, nor are they the only organized structure of radical extremists that would attack our nation. We must remain ever vigilant. There was a bit of irony on May 1st, 2011 that should not be lost on any of us. One of the events that transpired on that same day was that the late John Paul II, the Pope, was beatified and moved closer to sainthood. On May 1st, that occurred. He spent his life blazing a path of enlightenment, peace, love, and uplifting humanity. The second event that occurred on that day was the demise of bin Laden, who spent his life lighting a path of murder, deceit, and the destruction of humanity. While one found and is finding sainthood, the other found Satan. It is a good thing that he is no longer a plague on the earth, and the hope for humankind is that Pope John II would be our exemplar of goodness. Given the immense security challenges facing our nation, Congress should pass this legislation so that we may continue to fulfill our commitment to the safety and well-being of the American people. The men and women of the intelligence community may operate in the background, but they are at the forefront of our national defense and deserve every resource necessary to do their jobs. Mr. Speaker, I urge a no vote on the rule because in spite of Mr. Reed, my colleague on the Rules Committee, and the distinguished chairman, my good friend, touting the fact that we do have the number of amendments and the time. This is not an open rule, and I would have them to know that if it were an open rule, then all members would be able to offer this amendment to the bill. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back.